Before we get into this episode, I would like to make a quick disclaimer that all of Society Inspired's interviews and the information we share are 100% for learning experience and to hear the different sides of the various issues we discuss. We never endorse nor support violence, and we are committed to promoting peace. I want to create a safe space for learning and comfortable place for people to be able to start to speak. Hope you enjoy. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 16th episode of Society Inspired. My name is Gemma. I'm a 15-year-old Palestinian American teen, and I am so excited to have Stephanie from Grants for Animals as our special guest for episode number 16. Would you like to introduce yourself, tell us your story, and also share your preferred pronouns, please?
Great. Thanks so much. My name is Stephanie Mathers, and I run a business called Grants for Animals. My pronouns are she and her, and the story is a longer one, and I'm sure we'll get into that.
Okay, perfect. Starting with your pathway to veganism, what was your inspiration for becoming vegan?
Sure. So I grew up in a typical Midwestern household in the 80s, eating barbecue and potatoes,
Yes.
Back then, a lot of people didn't even know what veganism was. The idea of being a vegan was totally radical. Vegetarians, I think I maybe knew a couple, but I just never would have thought that that would be my path. And in my early 30s, I started to just think more about what I put in my body, like a lot of people. There were a lot of great documentaries coming out. It was right at the beginning of this huge, vegan documentary renaissance that we've had. So Forks Over Knives had come out. I watched that, and I'd had a decade or so of experience rescuing cats, and huge cat lady here.
Okay.
So I definitely had the human animal bond experience, and that is always my number one why for being vegan is the animal part.
Yes.
So there are all these different influences and forces, and I tried a few times to go vegetarian, but I didn't really know what to eat or how to cook.
Yeah.
So I would just buy all this processed fake meat. This was right around 2010, and it was not like it is now. The processed fake meat, fake cheese, it was not good.
Yeah.
So I would, cook everything I used to cook, but with the fake stuff, and it was gross. So I was trying and failing. And then I actually got into gardening and a CSA, and that's community supported agriculture. So you basically buy a weekly box of fruits or veggies from a farmer. And my farmer was this awesome guy, same farmer that I still work with. His name's David. He grew up in Asia, and we got this crazy boxes of like bitter melons, sunchokes, goji berry greens.
Yeah.
And of course, I didn't know what any of this was. And so I had to learn how to cook all these fruits and veggies. But I finally really learned how to do more than grill a burger. Thank goodness. So that was happening. And then in 2012, I asked my mom for Alicia Silverstone's Kind Diet for my birthday.
Okay.
And got that. Now that's a cookbook, but the first part is kind of more of a textbook, and it talks about health and nutrition and the whys behind being vegan. And it has a really compelling, powerful story about the dairy industry, which I had never even thought about. The fact that drinking milk is not normal. It's not natural, drinking cow's milk. It never even occurred to me.
Yeah.
And so I read this, I'm of course, crying my eyes out, reading this cookbook. And at the end of the cookbook, she gives you different options. And one is like, hey, just kind of flirt with being vegan and try some different stuff, or you can go all in with 30 days. And I'm an all-in person. So I'm like, here we go, 30 days.
I'm the same.
And, I had the tools for the first time. I kind of knew how to cook. I had all the whys. I understood the connection between veal and milk and cheese. And it was all kind of coming together. And then I got this other why, which was I felt amazing. I mean, I felt like I was walking on air. I can't even explain it, just physically. And then emotionally, because my beliefs were finally in alignment with eating, which you do 3 times a day.
Yep.
So when I got to the end of the 30 days, there was no question in my mind if I was going to keep going. It was like, all right, this is basically what I'm doing forever. And then I still do often watch documentaries and read things about all the different whys. And I always encourage people, whatever your main why is, if it's animals, you should still learn about the environmental parts. You should learn about the health parts, because it just reinforces all of your reasons for being vegan and helps you learn more about, all of the different components.
Yeah, I was the same way. I had my New Year's resolution was to go vegan, and I just did it. And my mom was like, "You don't have to do it all at once," because my mom did have a plant-based diet before she had me, and so she was like, "Gemma, like you don't have to do it all at once." Like she had known, and I was like, "No," and I just did it, and she was like, "Okay," and she just went along with me, and
That's awesome.
now we don't. Yeah, I don't even think about it. Like they say it's like a hard mental switch, and I think at first it just takes a little bit like adjusting, but then you don't even think about it as much.
Yeah.
What made you realize that writing or creating grants for animals is what you wanted to do with your English and writing career?
So this is kind of a long story. I did not set out to be a grant writer. My whole background's in education. I thought I was going to be an English teacher forever, but then I moved from English teacher to middle school principal, and I was in education for 20 years. And I always knew there was always something in my heart when I was younger that I would love to be a writer. And then as I got more into animals, I was always thinking I should do something with animals. But I just thought, well, you got certified to be an English teacher, this is what you're doing forever, kind of thing. So, but even when I was in education, I was doing a lot of grant writing. And when I became vegan, I was volunteering at a sanctuary here in Utah, and they needed help writing grants. So I just started volunteering and writing grants for them. And then in education, I wrote grants from everything from my own classroom all the way to like federal and state grants for our school. And grant writing is something you really experience over time and build your repertoire. There are some certification programs, but most people just learn as they go. So I was just kind of gaining experience. And then a lot of it is, the pandemic, whole COVID thing. So in early 2021 was a really big point in my life. I had gone through a lot of changes. I'd gone through within a 5-year span, like divorce, moving, working my way through school administration, had some kitties pass away, health challenges. And so just a lot had happened. And kind of the challenging part of this story, I'd wake up every morning, I'd get in the shower, and my boyfriend at the time would bring me a cup of coffee with full fat Oatly. As you probably know, very important to get the dark blue full fat Oatly. And he would bring me my coffee and set it on the bathroom counter. I would get out of the shower, drink my coffee, and start blow drying my hair. And then at some point, I would start crying. And I would be crying until I got to the parking lot of the school where I was the principal. I would sit in my car, I would try to get myself together, put on my game face, and go do my job. And I was totally miserable. And the big question is kind of, well, why was I crying, right? Aside the fact that I was trying to run a school in the middle of a pandemic, which I do not recommend to anybody.
Yeah, that must have been.
That was crazy. But it was a good job. And for a lot of people, being a principal would be the best job of their life. And in fact, this school is an amazing school. Awesome people, loved the teachers, loved the kids. And that was part of it, was I knew for some people, this was like their life's purpose. And why couldn't I just be grateful for this job? And a lot of people looked at me from the outside, and I know they were thinking, Stephanie totally made it. Like her whole life was working up to this point to be this principal, and she's going to run this school. But I knew it was not my purpose. And I felt so lost and confused every morning as I was crying to myself in the mirror. I actually stopped believing that there was such a thing of a life purpose. I was like mad at myself for not having figured out my life. I couldn't be grateful for my job. It was really a dark time.
Yeah.
And so then at that time, I finished out the school year, I made it, but I had started a vegan travel blog just as kind of a thing to do when I got home that would be fun for me to do and creative.
Yeah.
And it was all related to like veganism and adventure. It's not around anymore, but it was called VegX. So it was, you take like a national park or a state park and restaurant reviews, vegan related, like hiking boots and sleeping bags, backpacking food. And my favorite part was that every month I would go do a sanctuary spotlight. So I would tour a sanctuary, meet the founder, take a bunch of pictures, rub all the pigs' bellies, and write a blog post. And that really lit me up. I loved doing that. And it got me tuned into the nonprofit space. So one of my sanctuary spotlights, I met a total kindred spirit named Monica Stevens, who runs Jameson Humane in California.
Okay.
And we did the spotlight and had a really great visit, and then had lunch, and we're just chatting, and she was asking about different things I do for the school, and grant writing came up, and just talked about it a little, and then we went our separate ways. I wrote the spotlight. We were both really happy with how it turned out. A funny side story is all these people in her family, they were like, how long has this girl known you? Because she totally got it. And so Monica and I always joke, we only had known each other like for one day in this lifetime, but clearly like we're just had that connection.
Yeah.
So a few weeks later, she called me and she's like, hey, let's jump on a Zoom and talk about what you've done with grant writing and how you could help Jameson Humane. And so we started working together, and that was the first time that I actually saw the potential in grant writing, like the potential to help a nonprofit, the potential to of how much of a need there was. The blog was totally losing steam at that point, and I don't know if you have blogging in addition to your podcast, but it costs a lot of money to just upkeep a blog, like to have a really nice website. And so I was spending money. I wasn't making anything on the blog. So shut that down, started Grants for Animals super quick. It was one of those things that once you're in alignment for what you're supposed to be doing, all the good things happen, right? So I onboarded a small book of clients. I started treating it like a business. I actually set it up like a business. And the more I treated it like a business, the more successful it became, to the point where right now I actually have a waiting list for my full service monthly clients, which is, that blows my mind,
Awesome. I love that.
Yeah. So it was not just one thing, but the cool thing I think is for many people who find their purpose later in life, which is totally what I feel like happened with me. There were just all these experiences that seemed very disconnected, like you're writing grants 12 years ago at this sanctuary, you become vegan, you're writing policies for your school. And then all of a sudden you look back and realize every lesson or skill kind of converged into something bigger. And for me, it was so I can help these nonprofits. So I feel so grateful to have found something that is needed and something that I really love to do.
Awesome. Well, can you explain the process of writing grants for vegan nonprofits?
Sure. So I'll do kind of the bird's eye view for you, and then I can dive deeper into any of these, but not everybody thinks grant writing isn't as interesting and fun as I personally think it is. So, so writing for a vegan nonprofit or any nonprofit, it's got a lot of steps. Many people who run a sanctuary or any kind of nonprofit don't really understand what goes into a grant. Everybody wants a grant, of course, who wouldn't? But not everybody knows what that means. So the first step is to get your organization grant ready. And that term is a whole thing that, anybody listening to this can Google if they want to get more information. But that is something I help nonprofits with. Not all grant writers will help you get grant ready. Some of them will just write the grants, but I definitely help with that. So it means, number one, having nonprofit status. You can get a grant without being a nonprofit, but it's much more difficult. So you have to have, in America, the 501c3 document is what you need here in the US.
Okay.
You've got to have a board of directors. So your board of directors can't just be you and your BFF. You have to have more than just your founders. It's got to meet regularly, have a board contract, have meeting minutes. It's got to be a legit board of directors. And there's a ton of resources out there. I have some, but a Google search can help anybody organize that.
Okay.
You have to have some policies. So with animal nonprofits, you need to have a euthanasia policy, which is just, at what point do you euthanize animals, for what reasons, who makes the decision. If you deal with companion animals, you need a spay-neuter policy. That could be called, gelding policy if you deal with other types of animals. But, who gets fixed? When do they get fixed? If they can't be fixed for medical reasons, how do you keep the boys and girls separate? All that good stuff. And then in California, for example, a lot of grants want to see a diversity and inclusion policy. But many of my nonprofits are in California, so I've just noticed that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then having organized finances. So bookkeeping software, or at least a good spreadsheet, is a great place to start. Some basic reports, tax returns. These are all things, the reason why we call it getting grant ready is when you submit a grant, these are all things you have to attach. So if you don't even have these things, there's no point in writing a grant if you then can't have the required documents. And then the other part of being grant ready is having some fundable programs. So a lot of people think you can just get a grant for existing, and there are grants like that. They're called general operating expense grants or general operating support grants, but they're very, very rare.
Okay.
And so most of the times the grants want to know what the money is going for. So do you need to dig a new well for one of your areas where you keep animals? Are you going to be helping trap, neuter, release a bunch of community cats? Whatever it might be, they want a program. And you have to really get something like that together. You don't have to start it because you might be asking for the grant in order to put it in place, but you have to have the idea.
Wow.
Yeah. So all of that is just getting grant ready, and that can take months, but it's so important. And then after you're grant ready, you've got to find some grants that fit for what you want to do. And there's all different strategies for how to research grants. And then you build a pipeline of what you want to do for the next year, because a lot of grants only open a few times a year, or maybe even one time a year. So if there's a certain grant you want to go after, it might be open September to November, and you need to be really organized and kind of calendar out all of your grants. As you can probably tell, I'm the kind of person who likes spreadsheets and that sort of thing. So that's something that I do.
Got it.
And then there's the actual grant writing. And a lot of people are surprised when I tell them that when I work with an organization, only 25 to 40% of my time is actually writing grants. The rest of the time is everything else that we've been talking about, and the grant reporting. So once you get a grant, it's not over, it's just started. You have to put the program in place. You have to find a way to track it. And then in 6 months, in a year, or maybe even in 18 months, you have to prepare a report with everything that you've done. And in some cases, the grant reporting is way more work than the actual grant. So it's so important that sanctuaries or any animal nonprofits know that you've got to have that bandwidth in your organization for reporting, or have a grant writer that will assist with it. Just like with the getting grant ready, a lot of grant writers don't do reporting. I do it all because I found in the animal space, in the vegan space, they need help with everything, most of the nonprofits I work with. But it's really important to just be aware that reporting is a whole beast in and of itself.
Wow. Okay. So there's like 3 steps, sort of.
Yes.
A lot more than I thought.
Yes. And a lot of times, you're waiting 3 to 6 months after you submit a grant. Like just last week, I found out that one of my nonprofits and I got a grant that we had submitted last February. So that's even more than 6 months.
Yeah.
So it's, it's not like it's not like you get this vet bill and you have to have this vet bill paid and you can write a grant for it. You have to be really looking long term.
Got it. Okay. Well, you did just, say some challenges, but do you face any challenges or hate clapback when you're trying to inquire and provide these funds for vegan nonprofits?
So I'm usually going after grants that have an animal welfare focus. So there's not a lot of negativity that comes back, except there have been a couple things I found with environmental foundations. So probably to both of us and a lot of the people watching this or listening to this, they know that the environment and animal agriculture and being vegan is all one thing, right? It's pieces of the same puzzle. But one time I did a grant submission for an environmental group, and they came back at me with a declination saying, we fund environmental causes, not animal welfare. And I mean, I had made the connection, but the funniest thing is were an organization about saving the oceans. Well, if you've seen Seaspiracy, which if you hadn't, go watch it now. The best thing we can do for the oceans is to stop eating fish. And this whole thing was about education towards plant-based eating and plant-based cooking. And they're like, this doesn't apply to us. And I'm thinking, you have no idea. This totally applies. A lot of people, unfortunately, don't see the connection. So, and when you're a grant writer, when you're working with foundations, you have to be very, politically correct and always be very, kind and say the right thing to them. So you can't really argue back with them and say you're wrong. You just have to say, okay, thank you for your consideration. But, in my mind, I'm like, you guys are so wrong.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. How do you know as a nonprofit organizer, you already said some of the things, but if you're ready to take one of your courses to learn how to write a grant, or ask you as a grant writer to write a grant? Because I looked online and there were not, I feel like, a lot of resources for grant writers to say what you need. It's just come talk to me, and you gave a lot of resources on your platform. So
yes, I try to give a ton because at the end of the day, I'm trying to help as many animals possible. So every grant writer and every grant writing course is different. And everything I do is aimed at nonprofits that help animals, whether you're a 100% vegan organization or not.
Okay.
Something I found with animal related nonprofits is there are these amazing people who run these nonprofits who've spent so much time and energy saving animals, caring for them, curating their social media with amazing stories that they haven't always put in the systems and processes that they need to be grant ready. So that's why I will meet you wherever you're at for what I do. And for everything on Grants for Animals, like everything on my social media, it's always going to help you wherever you're at in your journey. You don't have to have a a certain operating budget. You have to be so many years old. So when I'm working with a nonprofit through actual grant writing or consulting, we can start anytime. There are actually a couple nonprofits I started working with before they even got their 501c3 designation. We just got everything in place early. And that was great because then we were ready to go once we got that.
Yeah.
With my course, my Train Your Own Grant Writer course starts with the basics. So it's 30 lessons, but the first 10 are all about getting grant ready. So things like, Finance 101, updating the profiles on nonprofit databases, getting all your documents together. So a whole 1/3 of that course is all the things we do before we even write a grant.
Okay.
And a lot of the initial beta testers who went through that for me were leaders of smaller and newer sanctuaries, and they said that it was really helpful. So with me, to access my resources, you can be anywhere, and I did that on purpose because I saw where I needed to start with most of the nonprofits who were coming to me. Yeah. But I would say the main thing that a nonprofit needs is actually it's more of a mindset. So you have to have you have to be willing to make some level of time commitment or financial commitment to grant writing. And you have to understand that, as we were talking about, it takes time. It takes 3 to 6 months to wait, sometimes longer. It's not a get rich quick endeavor.
Yeah.
So it's more about the mindset that this is a tool you can use to make your nonprofit more sustainable long term, and it's going to take time to build. But I always kind of connect it to planting a garden. So I don't know if are you into gardening at all?
I used to be. I haven't done it recently, so I'm not sure.
Okay.
Not
So
have patience for it though. So.
okay, so that's the perfect answer. You know, with gardening, I used to grow everything from seed, like even tomatoes and peppers. You know, peppers, it's 180 days from seed before you get a pepper. And sometimes you plant a seed and they don't even sprout for 14 days. And you're thinking, did I even put seeds in that dirt? Because nothing is happening, right? And so I always tell people, you know, doing grants, it's like planting a garden, because you're doing all these things and you won't see results for a long time. And then all of a sudden, you've got peppers and tomatoes and corn. Like, there will come a point where you are hearing back from a lot of foundations and you are getting things in, but you have to be willing to make that initial investment of time and or money, just depending on where your nonprofit is at.
Okay, perfect. What is your overall goal for the impact of grants for animals in the vegan nonprofit community?
So, I mean, the overall goal, I think, for anybody is to change the world in some way, right? That is meaningful to them. So with my group of clients that I work with for actual grant writing and consulting, my goal is to make as much money as possible for them so that they can be changing the world for animals and the people that, you know, help the animals. And then, since I can only take on so many full service clients, with my digital tools and courses, that goal is to make grant writing accessible and affordable to every animal related nonprofit out there. I mean, our whole goal as a community is to save as many animals, make the world a kinder, more compassionate place, you know, and as if we have all of the animal nonprofits have access to grant writers, they know how to write grants, they know what databases to look at, that's going to make us as a community stronger. And to me, it's an abundance mindset. It's not that there aren't enough grants for us or there isn't enough money. Like, no, there is plenty out there for every animal nonprofit to get what they need. You just have to have the right mindset and really go after it.
Yay. Okay. I love that it's about like helping. The more people we can help, the better. It's not necessarily about your own nonprofit, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Are there any resources you would like my followers and me to read, watch, or listen to?
So a couple that will help anybody who's listening to you who's from a nonprofit that I really love that are not mine. The Open Sanctuary Project is on Instagram. This is an awesome Instagram account that will cover everything from like animal enrichment to how to set up a policy manual to different legalities. It is a wealth of information. It is just an amazing Instagram account. They've got some free downloads and some paid downloads, but everything they have it is completely worth it from what I've seen. And I would highly recommend that. Even if you're just thinking of opening a sanctuary, follow that account.
Okay.
And then there's a Facebook group called Farm Sanctuaries Unite 2.0. It is a private Facebook group, so you do have to answer some questions and wait a couple days for them to accept you, but that is a great place to go if you're looking for kind of the hive mind of farm sanctuaries. And then, of course, my website has tools and courses to help you, and that's grantsforanimals.com. And every time it's Grants for Animals, it's the number 4. So grants spelled out and then the number 4, then animals.
Perfect. And lastly, where can my followers find you so they can keep up with you and all that you do?
So on all the socials, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, it's Grants for Animals. And a lot of the stuff I put out on Instagram, especially, just free tips that will help you get thinking about grants and get thinking about funding. I also do a Sunday nonprofit spotlight. And if I have any nonprofit leaders listening, I would love to highlight your nonprofit. You can also check out my website or email me, Stephanie@grantsforanimals.com. And if you sign up for my email list on the website, I do newsletters at least monthly with grants, tips, and tools. If you sign up for that, it'll tell you how to get a nonprofit spotlight. And you can I am active on all the platforms. Message me. I would love to connect with anyone who's listening.
And if you listen to me or if you knew, all those will be linked down below, all the resources, where to find Stephanie. So you can find all of that below. Thank you for taking the time to do this interview. Make sure to follow Stephanie on all social media platforms and check out or join her courses, check out her resources. Make sure to follow our other social media platforms as well, so you don't miss out on more interviews and important information. I hope you enjoyed the 16th episode of Society Inspired, and we will see you guys next time.